In the heart of ancient Johor, long before the rivers were tamed by trade and memory, there lived a healer known only as Tapomai. She was a guardian of currents, with hands that could stitch broken bones and hearts with river herbs and moon chants. Villagers came to her in silence and left with strength, never knowing the weight she bore. But power, even when gifted, carries envy. One season, a fever swept through the land, deep and maddening. The river turned murky, and Tapomai, though exhausted, walked the banks night after night, whispering spells, feeding fish with balm, waiting for the signs. Then one night, she vanished. Some say she was pushed into the river after being tied to a big rock and drowned by those who feared she had grown too powerful. Others claim she drowned herself in grief after the villagers refused to heed her warnings about greed, building dams, letting fish beyond need, silencing the sacred flow. Whatever the truth, the river remembered, and from its depths, something awoke. Where Tapomai once healed, a spirit began to linger, red-eyed, long-bearded, tangled in reeds and sorrow. No longer entirely human, no longer purely myth. A Jembalang heir. It took the forms of birds and vines, reeds and stones, watching, feeding on fish not for hunger, but ritual, leaving only bones and scales as reminders. It did not roar. It did not rage. It tested. Those who fished without reverence found their nets empty. Those who listened to the water's whisper might glimpse her, or hear a slow breath beneath the surface. She waited ... not for revenge, but for a worthy voice. Centuries passed, and in the village of Badapahet, a boy named Badang was born to poor farmers. Frail and quiet, he worked as a coolie under Orang Kaya Nirasura, clearing forests and surviving on scraps. His only solace was fishing in the river, until his traps began returning only bones and scales. One night, as the waning crescent moon hung low in the sky, Badang caught the culprit. A Jembalang heir, a river spirit with red eyes and tangled hair. Badang seized it, his thin fingers trembling but determined. He demanded a reward, his voice barely a whisper in the night. The spirit's eyes glowed like embers as it offered him super strength, but only if he swallowed the magical red gems called Geliga from its vomit. Badang hesitated, the weight of centuries pressing upon him. How can we accept what has barely begun? He thought, but hunger and desperation drove him forward. He closed his eyes and accepted. From that moment, Badang could uproot trees, lift boats, and split stones with his bare hands. His feats reached the ears of Raja Sri Rana Wikrama, who summoned him to Singapura and made him a Hulia Balang, a champion of the court. Badang helped villagers, won duels, and even defeated Nadi Bijaya, a warrior from India, by hurling a massive stone into the Singapore River. But the king gave him a warning, his voice low and heavy with ancient wisdom. Strength is not yours alone. It must be passed, or it will rot the soul. Badang vowed never to use his power for pride, and never to teach it to the greedy. He knew then that this was no ordinary gift. As Badang aged, his strength did not fade. He revealed to his closest apprentice, Tan Laksamana Aryan, that the power was not just physical, it was spiritual. The secret lay in a ritual of balance, river fasting, submerging in flowing water during full moon, saltless meals to keep the body humble, silence at dawn to hear the river's memory, one act of service per day to keep the spirit light. But he warned, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of the waters, if you teach this to one who seeks glory, the river will reclaim it. Tan Laksamana Aryan listened, his heart heavy with the weight of this knowledge. He knew that preserving this strength required more than physical prowess. It demanded humility, service, and a deep connection to the river's spirit. Years passed, and Badang's legend grew. Villagers whispered tales of his feats, embellishing them with each retelling. Some claimed he could move mountains with a single breath. Others said he could part the seas with a wave of his hand. But Badang remained humble, always remembering the king's warning and the river's gift. One day, as the sun set over Singapore, casting long shadows across the land, Badang felt a calling. He knew his time in this world was coming to an end. He gathered his closest friends and disciples, including Tun Laksamana Aryan, and led them to the banks of the Singapore River. There, under the fading light, Badang spoke his final words. Strength is not in the fist, but in the hand that lifts others. If you hear this, the river still remembers. With those words, he stepped into the flowing waters, his body dissolving into mist and memory. Badang's physical form may have vanished, but his legacy lived on. His grave on Buru Island was marked by 2 stone pillars sent by the king of Kalinga, a testament to the far-reaching impact of his deeds. But over time, his teachings were distorted. Some descendants used the rituals for war, others for fame. One even tried to bottle the river water and sell it as minyak badang. The river grew silent. The Jembalong air stirred again, its red eyes gleaming with sorrow and disappointment. It watched as generations passed, each further removed from the true meaning of Badang's gift. The spirit waited, patient as the flowing waters, for someone worthy to rediscover the ancient wisdom. Centuries later, in the bustling metropolis that Singapore had become, a young girl named Arya stumbled upon a cracked stone near the Singapore River. Curious, she peered into the crevice and found a weathered diary, its pages brittle with age. As she carefully opened it, her eyes widened in wonder. It was Badang's diary, preserved through the ages by some unseen force. Arya read the ancient words, her heart racing with each revelation. She learned of Badang's humble beginnings, his encounter with the Jembalong air, and the true nature of his strength. But it was his final entry that struck her most deeply. Strength is not in the fist, but in the hand that lifts others. If you hear this, the river still remembers. In that moment, Arya understood. She began the rituals, not for power, but to heal. She submerged herself in the river during full moons, ate saltless meals, and maintained silence at dawn. Each day, she performed an act of service, no matter how small. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, things began to change. The river's song grew stronger, its waters clearer. Fish returned in greater numbers, and the banks flourished with new life. Arya's strength grew, not in her muscles, but in her spirit. She lifted others, not with her hands, but with her kindness and compassion. As word of Arya's deeds spread, others were inspired to follow her example. They too began to listen to the river, to serve their communities, to find strength in humility. And in the depths of the Singapore River, the Jembalong air stirred once more, not in anger or sorrow, but in hope. In the heart of modern Singapore, where skyscrapers cast long shadows over ancient waters, the river sings once more, and those who listen closely might hear, in the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, the whispered wisdom of a long-ago healer, a humble coolie turned legend, and a young girl who remembered the true meaning of strength. For Arya had rediscovered the true legacy of Badang, that real strength lies not in physical prowess, but in the power to uplift others. And as long as this wisdom endured, passed down through generations like the flowing of a river, the spirit of Badang would live on. For in the end, power passed without wisdom becomes a curse. But strength shared with humility becomes legacy. A legacy as enduring as the rivers that flow through the heart of our world, connecting past, present, and future in an unbroken stream of memory and hope.